Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, day one. In just hours, the House Select Committee on the deadly Capitol riot will hold its first public hearing. Could this investigation lead to subpoenas? The political battle brewing within the Republican Party and what we can expect on day one. Our Capitol Hill correspondent is standing by. Stopping the spread. The nation's first vaccine mandates are in place from cities and states, even on the federal level. We'll tell you which states and which government agency are telling workers get vaccinated or face weekly testing, and why the White House is keeping international travel restrictions right where they are. Dreams dashed. Team champion Naomi Osaka's stunning defeat just days after lighting the Olympic cauldron. But as one of the world's greatest athletes bows out, a 17-year-old swimmer makes history and wins gold. Where the U.S. stands in worldwide medal totals, we have the latest from Tokyo this morning. And that was a fun one to watch, that 17-year-old winning and her hometown cheering.
I know. The reaction, even without the packed crowds, the reactions are still fun because there's cameras at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's so sweet to see, especially when she pulled ahead. We'll get to that in a little bit, but we start this morning with the first House hearings on the January 6th insurrection.
The House Select Committee will meet today for the start of potentially months of public testimony. Today's witnesses: 4 police officers who protected Congress that day, 2 from the Capitol Police and 2 from the D.C. Metro Police Department, including Michael Fanone, who suffered a heart attack during the siege. As far as who's asking the questions, Speaker Pelosi has now appointed 2 Republicans to the group. Congressman Adam Kinzinger will join Representative Liz Cheney. Kinzinger was added after Pelosi rejected a couple of Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy's choices for the panel, prompting the GOP leader to pull all 5 of his picks. The committee's chair is Democratic Congressman Benny Thompson. In a Washington Post opinion piece, he wrote, "The committee will provide the definitive accounting of one of the darkest days in our history." Congressman Jamie Raskin and Adam Schiff, both former impeachment managers, explained their goals for the hearing.
We're starting off with the law enforcement officers because they were on the front lines defending Congress, defending the democracy against these waves of medieval-style violence.
Our role is going to be to fully uncover the facts. What is it that people did at that rally to instigate violence? How many of them went to that rally fully planning to do violence even before it began? Where was the financing for it? What role did the administration play in it?
Last night, GOP leader McCarthy made a last-ditch effort to get more Republicans onto the Select Committee. He introduced a resolution on the House floor to push Speaker Pelosi to appoint all 5 of his picks to the group, but his efforts went nowhere in the democratically controlled House. All that political back and forth leading up to what will certainly be a historic day. Joining us now to break down what could happen is NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell and congressional reporter for Politico Nicholas Wu. So, Leanne, I want to start with you. Please set the stage. How will the hearings work today? What can we expect to see?
Good morning, Joe. This will be the first time that Congress officially hears from rank-and-file police officers who were on the front lines on that day. Now, some of the things we're going to see in some of the testimony our viewers might be familiar with, including a video of Officer Hodges, who was trapped and being crushed in those doors at the Capitol during this siege. But the Representative Adam Schiff tells reporters that we are going to see new video, things that have not been unearthed, different angles. So there will be some new testimony here. But as far as this is concerned, it's going to be extremely painful and emotional testimony because these officers are still experiencing the trauma and the effects from that day. So it could be an extremely difficult day for them. As far as the committee is concerned, we are going to hear opening statements from Representative Benny Thompson, the top Democrat, and Representative Liz Cheney, a Republican, who signals how important the Democrats think her position on the committee and her role on this committee will be. One other thing, Joe, it's going to be really interesting because most hearings on Capitol Hill, there's a lot of tension between Republicans and Democrats. This hearing, all the members, the 2 Republicans and the 7 Democrats, are mostly on the same page.
Nicholas, let's talk about something else that Chairman Thompson wrote in the Washington Post. He said, this hearing is just the beginning of the Select Committee's work when it comes to the security of the Capitol and our democracy. Nothing will be off limits. What are you watching out for today and in the weeks and maybe even months ahead?
What I'm watching for today is exactly what this new footage from police officers is going to tell us. Is this going to show what other groups might have been present at the insurrection that we didn't know about, or what sort of weapons they carried? And then moving forward from here, Intelligence Chairman Schiff told us yesterday that he was hoping there would be greater compliance from the Biden administration with the committee's request for documents and witnesses than there had been with his investigations during the Trump administration. So I'll be waiting to see whether this means there'll be better cooperation with the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, other agencies who we're still looking to learn lots from about the insurrection and what we knew about the threat beforehand.
Leanne, no surprise, we've seen plenty of back and forth between Speaker Pelosi and Leader McCarthy surrounding the makeup of this committee. But now does it look like we're seeing a larger fracture between McCarthy and the two Republicans on the committee, Cheney and Kinzinger?
Absolutely. The back and forth between McCarthy and Cheney and Kinzinger continues. Now, let's be clear. Cheney and Kinzinger have not cared about what Leader McCarthy has said about them. They think that they are doing the right thing, and they think that Leader McCarthy is capitulating to the former President Trump and his base. But that back and forth continued yesterday. Let's listen to what McCarthy said and how they responded.
Some Republicans have been saying that the GOP should play ball on this committee. You could get the three.
Who was that? Adam and Liz?
Well,
aren't they kind of like Pelosi Republicans?
McCarthy called you a Pelosi Republican. How do you respond to that?
Look, it's childish. We're doing big things right now. We're getting to the answers of the worst attack on the Capitol since the War of 1812.
We have important work to do, and I think that's pretty childish.
So they both said that what Leader McCarthy doing and saying about them is childish, but Leader McCarthy has not chosen to participate in this select committee, but he is holding a press conference in the next hour with his 5 choices. So he's going to try to shape the message, but he will do that from the outside, not as a part of this process, Joe.
And Nicholas, quickly, in the end, is it possible for any outcome to be widely accepted, or no matter what, is it going to be dismissed on the right as partisan?
Republicans have been railing against this commission as partisan from the start. And even, it's worth remembering that Republicans in the Senate filibustered the bipartisan independent panel. So a lot of this could possibly be lost in the partisan mudslinging of Washington. So we'll see what happens with that in the coming months.
All right, Leanne Caldwell and Politico's Nicholas Wu, thank you both for kicking us off this morning. We appreciate it.
Public officials are calling for more restrictions as the U.S. sees another rise in coronavirus cases. Cities across the U.S. are now bringing back mask mandates as White House officials say they won't lift the ban on travel from certain countries. NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett joins us this morning. Maura, good morning. Tell us more about the decision to keep these travel restrictions in place. What are some of the countries impacted by this? And does it mean anything for Americans with travel hopes abroad this year?
Good morning, Savannah. So this decision stems from the prevalence of the Delta variant in the U.S. this month. More than 80% of the cases that we're seeing are linked to Delta infections. And so these travel restrictions are actually more so impacting people looking to come into the U.S. Basically, right now, the U.S. Restricts any travel from any non-residents that have been in places like the U.K., South Africa, Iran, Brazil, other countries like that in the last 14 days. But this does also, the CDC is recommending that the U.S. citizens, Americans looking to travel this summer, avoid going to the U.K. given the surge in cases there. There aren't any other bans in terms of which countries you can go to, but the CDC recommends if you're looking to travel to take a look at their website, and you can look at the risk level of each COVID risk in other countries that you're looking to go to.
Okay, let's now talk vaccinations. A coalition of leading medical groups is calling for mandatory vaccinations for all healthcare workers. We have seen this play out at some hospitals and be met with some criticism, but which groups are behind this push and what are they saying now? What's the reaction?
So this is a group made up of about 50 organizations, one of them the American Medical Association, and they're recommending that all employers are vaccinated in these healthcare systems. They say that requiring vaccinations for employment is, quote, the logical fulfillment of the ethical commitment to all patients in their care. And now this also comes separately from the healthcare industry. We saw yesterday New York City and the state of California requiring their employees to be vaccinated or submit to weekly testing. Savannah.
And more quickly, we've been talking about cities reinstating mask mandates. Savannah, Georgia has announced they will now require masks indoors and on public transportation. We know Los Angeles has been doing something similar. What did officials say about this decision?
The mayor of the city of Savannah said that this is due to 4 factors. Again, the prevalence of the Delta variant, a low vaccination rate, locally large gatherings, and the fact that people are letting their guard down. And he's saying until those case numbers go back down, they won't be lifting that mandate. He's asking people not to complain, but to instead to get vaccinated and mask up. And obviously, those factors are the same things we're seeing spike in a lot of communities around the country. Here in Chicago, even the mayor is saying that as cases rise, she's thinking about reinstating that mask mandate, as well as also looking at reinstating certain restrictions.
All right, lots to watch for. Maura, thank you so much.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio is now requiring all municipal workers get vaccinated by September 13th. If workers refuse, they'll face weekly COVID testing. Police officers and public school teachers are among those impacted by the new policy. The move will make New York City one of the largest U.S. employers to require that employees get vaccinated, affecting about 340,000 people. NBC News correspondent Rahima Ellis has more.
Good morning, Savannah and Joe. As New York City's COVID positivity rate has gone up because of the Delta variant spreading in the city, the mayor announced on Monday that all New York City workers have to be vaccinated or subject to weekly testing because he wants to make certain that everyone in the city is safe. Take a listen.
This is about our recovery. This is about what we need to do to bring back New York City. This is about keeping people safe. This is about making sure our families get through COVID okay. This is about bringing back jobs, you name it.
This mandate takes effect September 13th, and that's also the first full day of the start of the new school year. And as we say, it is for all New York City workers. That's more than 330,000 of them, including teachers, police officers, firefighters, sanitation workers, and everyone working in a school, from the staff to the cafeteria workers. It should also be mentioned that this comes on top of another mandate that the mayor issued last week, and this was for all workers inside of New York City public hospitals. He said that they must also are mandated to get vaccine or they will be subject to weekly COVID testing. The mayor also now is urging that private companies that are stationed here in New York, that they should mandate their workers to do the same thing. Savannah and Joe.
All right, Rahima Ellis. Rahima, thank you so much.
Let's now bring in Dr. Amish Adalja. He's the senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Dr. Adalja, good morning. So we just heard there in Rahima's report about New York City requiring these vaccinations or testing for city workers. Many other cities are following suit. I mean, what do you think about this plan? Is this actually going to help prevent outbreaks?
It definitely will prevent outbreaks. We know the biggest factor now in whether a state has cases that are spiraling out of control is how vaccinated their population has been. We've seen with mandates for influenza that they really increase vaccine uptake. And I think this is something that people should be looking at all across the country, that organizations, employers, including my own in the healthcare industry, should be mandating people that be vaccinated as a condition of employment. These vaccines are safe and efficacious. Businesses need them for workforce resilience. And I think it's one way to move forward in this pandemic.
Also, what do you think about travel? We heard just before, Rahima, from Maura, that the U.S. is keeping these foreign travel restrictions and many cities are bringing back these mask mandates. What would you tell people who have summer trips planned, who thought, you know, things are getting better, I'm going to take a vacation this year, I didn't last year? What do you think about that? Is it safe to do so?
It all depends on the context. So first of all, I'd make sure that you're fully vaccinated and everyone in your traveling group is fully vaccinated if they can be. Then you need to take a look and see what goes on in those countries. What types of testing and quarantine requirements are there, and see that you can be able to meet them. And remember that you have to get a test coming back into the United States. Then I think you can sort of do it in a safe manner, but you've got to be smart about it. You've got to be proactive, and you want to have all of this planned out before you leave.
Now, Doctor, also yesterday we got some new guidance released by HHS, the Department of Justice, announcing that long COVID can be a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Long COVID, something we, of course, still have a lot of questions on, but what were some of the effects they pointed to? And if someone is dealing with this, maybe thinks that they're dealing with this after having contracted COVID, what should they know? What should they do if they are having to try to deal with long COVID?
Long COVID is still a bit of a mystery. We don't have really great diagnostic criteria. We don't really know who's at risk for it, other than it happens more commonly in females, older people, people that have other medical conditions. That's more likely to be someone that gets long COVID, but we still can't predict it when we don't have a blood test that you can do, which makes it very hard. But it's clear that some proportion of people who have COVID can't get back to their basic level of living. They have difficulty with their activities of daily life. They have brain fog. They have an inability to exercise at the level that they did before. And I think that's what's being recognized as being limiting, and something that the government wants to be part of the disability program that we have with the ADA and other laws. I think that this is going to be something that's a long tail of this pandemic. And if you think you might have these symptoms, there are long haul COVID clinics opening up at many medical centers where they're trying to study these people, understand these people, try to figure out what's common among them, what's different among them, and what treatments might work.
And I imagine that this gives you some peace of mind to have this guidance from Health and Human Services and the Department of Justice, if it's something that you're dealing with, at least that it's being recognized. Dr. Adalja, always great to see you. Thank you so much.
Wildfires raging out west are having an impact on the country in some way, from Alaska all the way to the East Coast. Fires are burning from Alaska to Texas, blanketing the country in smoke. As far as the East Coast, more than 5,000 firefighters on the front lines are struggling to contain the flames. In all, at least 85 wildfires are burning across 13 states. More than 2.2 million acres have burned so far this year. That's 500,000 more than this time last year. And the wildfire season is far from over. Northern California's Dixie Fire is now burning an area the size of New York City, threatening 10,000 homes.
And with that, let's get a check on your Morning News Now weather.
Yeah, Bill Cairns is back with us, fresh from his Ironman finish. Bill, great to have you with us. Congratulations.
I just don't get it. I thought you guys were my friends, and then you go and let me do something crazy like that.
Honestly, what did I email you? I said, what? What are you doing?
Yeah, 4 years ago, New Year's Eve, a bunch of dads and I did a weight loss challenge, and I went to run 2 miles. And a guy walking his golden retriever passed me 4 years ago. And that was my first workout. And then, yeah, pretty crazy. And I slowly built up and built up. I wasn't super fast. I wasn't super slow. I was right in the middle. And I was so happy to have my kids there to watch at the finish. Look how emaciated I was. I think I lost 6 to 8 pounds during the 13 hours of working out. It was goodness. It was pretty crazy. Yeah.
Also, Bill, that note from your daughter. It's so sweet. I saw that on Instagram too.
Yeah, that would. I looked at that many times. She tried to, because dehydration is a huge problem. So, yeah, she reminded me to drink and said she loved me and hoped I did well. So, yeah, that definitely helped.
Up there, William Cairns. Yeah. Oh, and your daughters are adorable. I think the note's the next picture, but so sweet that they did that. There it is. Drink every 10 minutes. Love you.
That was good.
Too cute. All right, we're stopping for you. Congrats.
All right, thank you very much. Never doing it again. All right, so dangerous heat throughout the middle of the country today. It's going to be very hot. This is kind of one of the first times. Much of the heat has been in the west, so we're kind of switching things up a little bit. The southeast and the northern plains are going to be very hot. The Midwest hasn't had a brutal summer. 93 in Chicago today. Tomorrow it gets to 97 in St. Louis, and then the heat's going to continue right through the end of the week. It's the peak of summer. You kind of expect it a little bit. So this isn't like earth-shattering news, but it's really the first hot temperatures. We haven't talked a lot about the heat in Dallas and other areas. And isolated severe today going through the Great Lakes and maybe into the Northeast. Tomorrow, watch out in areas like Wisconsin, but not so concerned about severe weather. And you know what's great, guys? Now we're pushing through the end of July. And remember, we had all those problems in the tropics early in June. We're like, this is going to be a horrific season. I need to knock on wood somewhere, but we don't have any issues coming at us in the tropics. So that's good.
All right. That is good. All right. We're happy to have you back. Thank you, Bill. See you in a bit. President Biden is ending America's combat mission in Iraq by the end of the year, 18 years after troops were deployed to the country. The president made the agreement with Iraq's prime minister during a meeting in the Oval Office yesterday.
I think things are going well. Our role in Iraq will be as a dealing with it's just to be available, to continue to train, to assist, to help, and to deal with ISIS as it arrives. But we are not going to be, by the end of the year, in a combat mission.
NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joins us now from Washington. Mike, good morning. So a lot to unpack here. First, let's just start with what we just heard there from the president. And it sort of sounds like this isn't a withdrawal of troops like we had seen in Afghanistan, kind of more like a reclassification of America's role in the country with troops there. Has anything really changed here? Walk us through this.
Yeah, that's right, Savannah. Iraqi diplomatic and military leaders have been in Washington for the past week, meeting with their American counterparts, working on this agreement that was finalized in that sit-down yesterday in the Oval Office between President Biden and Prime Minister al-Kadhimi. And really what it means is no change in the number of U.S. military troops in Iraq, but a definite change in their job description from combat to training and assistance. But they're certainly going to be maintaining that presence in large part to avoid what led to a surge in the U.S. presence there 7 years ago, which was the rise of ISIS. Here's the president describing that job description yesterday.
We're also committed to our security cooperation. Our shared fight against ISIS is critical for the stability of the region, and our counterterrorism cooperation will continue even as we shift to this new phase we're going to be talking about.
Taken together with the president's announcement about the end of the U.S. mission in Afghanistan, this is a significant departure for Biden, who, as a senator, supported the U.S. deployment to Afghanistan and then into Iraq in 2001 and 2002. As vice president, he was encouraging a withdrawal at the time. And now, as president, he's able to at least say, if symbolically, if not substantively, that both missions will be ending by the end of the year.
And now, Mike, last month, the U.S. carried out an air raid on Iran-backed militias in Iraq, which the prime minister condemned. How have relations been since then? And did that incident play a role in this announcement at all?
Yeah, that was certainly a factor in the discussions leading up to yesterday's announcement. And in fact, in comments after he left the White House last night, Prime Minister al-Kadhimi did say that, as the U.S. has maintained, the U.S. troops are in Iraq at the invitation of the Iraqi government. And he said the Iraqi government will be responsible for the security of our guests, encouraging the U.S. not to engage in any further retaliatory missile strikes. But what's also on the mind of the U.S. at this point is elections that are scheduled to take place in October. There is strong confidence in the role the prime minister is playing at this time. They see him as a strong leader, and this announcement gives him some political space to be able to make the case back home that the U.S. role is changing, is ending, in fact.
And now, Mike, let's talk through concerns. I mean, could this decision by the U.S. play into the hands of Iran because of the fact that they hold a lot of power in Iraq through these militia groups and some political parties? What's this going to mean there?
That's certainly always a concern when you talk about the balance of power in the region. But one of the reasons why U.S. officials say they have so much confidence in Prime Minister al-Kadhimi is because of the role he's been playing as a regional leader, beyond just his role as a leader for the country of Iraq itself. Recently, we've seen him convening a meeting in Iraq of Saudi leaders and Iranian leaders, something that really is unprecedented. He also had the first visit of an Egyptian president to Iraq since the 1990s. So they see the Iraqi Prime Minister, and why they want to empower him at this moment is because they believe, is a strong political player who is able to maintain these various difficult sectarian conflicts within the region. That's certainly a tall order, but one that the White House certainly has confidence in him to maintain.
All right, Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning.
NBC News correspondent Claudio Labanga joins us from Rome. Good morning, Claudio.
Good morning, Savannah. Good morning, Joe. Well, today, a pro-democracy activist in Hong Kong has become the first person to be found guilty of inciting terrorism and secession there in that part of the world under a new and controversial national security law. Now, the 24-year-old was arrested last year after he ran into a number of policemen with his motorcycle during a demonstration. And he is one of more than 100 people, mainly demonstrators, who've been arrested under this this controversial law since it has become effective in 2019. He now risks life in prison. And in other news, North and South Korea have decided to re-establish a communication hotline after it broke down more than a year ago following a failed attempt by the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and the former U.S. President Donald Trump to establish a second summit. Well, now the two Koreas and the two leaders, of course, want to improve ties and rebuild trust, even though they are officially still at war, because at the end of the Korean War in 1953, they signed an armistice and not a peace treaty. Now, another court, this time in Germany, is trying to figure out what to do with a pensioner who turned out had a very interesting hobby. The authorities in 2015 found in his basement a World War II tank, an anti-aircraft gun, and even a torpedo. Now he risks a fine of up to $500,000, or the judge may just settle that with a warning that maybe he should start collecting things that are more suitable for pensioners, like stamps and not weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, things that are more suitable for basements also. What size is this guy's basement?
Must have a big basement. That's a big basement.
Okay.
Put a lot of stamps on that.
That is something, yeah. All right, Claudio, thank you. Coming up, a face-off in the Lone Star State for a ticket to Washington, D.C.
We'll take you to Texas, where congressional race is heating up, and look at what the outcome of this race could reveal about next year's midterms. After his trip to space last week, Jeff Bezos is now offering NASA a $2 billion discount. The Blue Origin CEO and Amazon founder is trying to win a contract to help build the lunar landing system that'll put astronauts back on the moon in a few years' time. There's one problem. The contract was actually already awarded to Elon Musk's SpaceX for $2.9 billion back in April, but Bezos filed a protest calling that decision unfair. In a letter to NASA, Bezos now says his company would waive all payments up to $2 billion to be a part of the historic mission. NASA has not commented yet. Bezos, of course, traveled into space last week on the first crewed New Shepard rocket flight. So apparently the billionaire space race is not just about the actual billionaires physically going into space, but also all this other stuff, too, which is where the money can also be made.
Yes, absolutely. And there are, so many billionaires and what they're doing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, exactly.
And then head into space, which we will continue to do because it is quite interesting. All right. Thanks, Joe. Now, Tom Barrack, former President Trump's 2017 inaugural committee chair, says he is, quote, 100% innocent after being charged with secretly lobbying the U.S. on behalf of the United Arab Emirates. He pleaded not guilty yesterday and is now awaiting trial. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams has more details.
As expected, Thomas Barrack pleaded not guilty, and the judge allowed him to remain free while he's waiting for his trial, which is several months away. But the judge imposed several conditions in light of the fact that Barrack is a wealthy man with connections in Lebanon, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia, three countries that have no extradition treaty with the U.S. So he has to surrender his passport. He has to wear a GPS ankle bracelet monitor. He can travel from his home in Colorado, but only to visit his children in California and to attend court proceedings in New York, where the trial will be held. He cannot travel by private plane or have financial transactions with foreigners, and he can't have any dealings at all with officials of the UAE. He's accused of lobbying candidate and then President Trump on behalf of the UAE without registering as a foreign lobbyist. Prosecutors say, for example, that he arranged meetings with UAE officials and promoted the UAE in his own media appearances, and under the law that counts as lobbying, and that he was in constant touch with a businessman in the Emirates who was close to UAE officials. The government says he met with some of them in December of 2016 after Donald Trump was elected and suggested that they give him a wish list of foreign policy goals that they'd like the U.S. to adopt. And the FBI says he also falsely denied this lobbying when he was questioned about it. After leaving court on Monday, he said he's 100% confident he'll be acquitted. He also put out a written statement saying that not far from the Brooklyn courthouse is the Statue of Liberty. And then he added this, quote, "That statue is made of steel with a patina of copper. We're in the middle of a very heated moment, and I can only tell you that the hardest steel is forged from the hottest fire." Savannah, Joe?
All right, Pete Williams, thank you so much.
Voters in Texas's 6th congressional district are heading to the polls today for a runoff election that is being seen as a test of former President Trump's influence within the GOP. The seat opened up in February after the death of Congressman Ron Wright, who died after contracting COVID-19. His widow, Susan Wright, is facing off against State Representative Jake Ellzey. Let's go to NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson with more on this. So, Priscilla, first of all, tell us, who is the favorite to win here?
Yeah, that is the question, of course. You have Susan Wright, who is working to fill the seat of her late husband. She announced her campaign a little over 2 weeks after he passed, and so this is certain to be a very big day for her. We know that during the special election in May, Susan Wright did come out on top with 19% of the vote. She was facing off against 23 other candidates, but the fellow Republican that she's now on the ballot against today is Jake Ellzey, who was just under her with around 14% of the vote in May. Now, her campaign says that she is, according to internal polling, about 12 points ahead of Ellzey going into today. So they're certainly feeling confident, but we haven't seen any other polling here. So it still could be a toss-up. But if we're going off of what her campaign is saying internally, they feel like she may have it in the bag today.
Here's a key question, and why she might have it in the bag is who has former President Donald Trump thrown his support behind, and what kind of difference could that make in the race?
Right. That is the key question. According to polling from last month, former President Trump has around an 86% favorability rating among Texas Republicans, and he has thrown his full support behind Susan Wright. He endorsed her just before that runoff or that special election in May. And what we saw is that it appeared to have an impact then. Susan Wright and Jake Ellzey were around tied with those early ballots. And then she got that bump on Election Day whenever he endorsed her just a few days before that. And so we saw her and the former president hold a tele-rally last night. And I want to play a bit of what he had to say as he endorsed her. Take a listen.
And I'm asking everybody to go out and vote tomorrow for a really terrific person, a wonderful person, Susan Wright. She has my complete and total endorsement. She's the only one. I'm endorsing one person.
And so while Ellzey does not have that coveted Trump endorsement, he does have a ton of money. He has out-fundraised Susan Wright by far, and he also has endorsements from former Texas governor and also former energy secretary under President Trump, Rick Perry, and also Representative Dan Crenshaw of Texas. So the battle of the endorsements there.
Yeah.
Joe?
I mean, this is a race that you don't really see anywhere else. You've got people voting to fill a vacancy left by someone who died after getting COVID-19, just as cases across the country are rising. I mean, what is the mood like there? I know turnout probably isn't huge, not a lot of voters turning out quite yet this morning, but you've been speaking with people in the community. What is the mood there like right now leading into this?
Yeah, polls will open here in around a half hour. But, you know, the backdrop of which this election is taking place is I don't think that's lost on folks today, and certainly not on Susan Wright, who is competing in this race. Right. And so but to your point, turnout is typically lower during special elections, even without a pandemic going on. We saw in May during the special election here, it was around 13% turnout. And that's really going to be the big question of the day. How many people are going to come out and vote amid all of this that is going on? Because, of course, both of these candidates are going to be looking for high turnout today to sort of give them a boost and potentially a leg up here. Joe?
All right, Priscilla Thompson, thanks so much. The Biden administration wants to curb toxic wastewater from coal plants, reversing a major Trump-era environmental rollback.
Yeah, the Environmental Protection Agency announced it would set stricter requirements for power plants. Wastewater can contaminate rivers with pollutants linked to cancer, heart disease, and other critical health issues. NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman joins us now with more on this.
There's Josh.
There's
hey there,
Josh.
Josh. Good to have you with us. So tell us, how effective could these stricter rules be? When would they be put in place?
Well, this could be significant, Joe, because we're talking about things in the water like mercury, lead, even arsenic. And these are basically produced when you have coal-fired power plants that generate electricity from burning that coal to produce steam that then turns a turbine that generates electricity. That creates a lot of toxic wastewater that under the Trump administration, the rules on that were made more lenient. So this is going to take a while because the rulemaking process is complicated. It could take up until the end of President Biden's first term. And that's why a lot of environmental activists are saying not fast enough. They want the Biden administration to immediately revert back to the rules that were in place during the Obama administration. The Biden administration did not decide to go that route, probably because they anticipated facing court challenges if they tried to do that.
And now, Josh, this is just one of many Trump-era rollbacks the Biden administration is looking to undo. Can you tell us about other policies they're taking a look at?
Yeah, Savannah, this has been pretty much a pattern starting from day one when President Biden took office and signed an executive order directing his government to look at 100 plus Trump-era regulations, policies, et cetera, that he felt were damaging to the environment to see what could actually be reversed. Of course, that started with putting the U.S. back into the Paris Climate Agreement that President Trump pulled out of. But in the months since then, we've seen Biden go back to Obama-era rules or stronger on tailpipe emissions, on methane emissions from production and industry, as well as other environmental factors such as preserving national monuments, addressing clean air and greenhouse gas emissions. So really the Biden administration saying anywhere the Trump administration tried to roll things back, we're going to try to put it back in place.
And Josh, sticking with the environment here, we have to mention those massive wildfires tearing through the western U.S. right now. What is the White House doing to try and help and to try and prevent more devastating fires like these?
Yeah, this is a really tough one. The Biden administration so far has been mostly focused on trying to increase recruitment and retention for firefighters, especially those federal firefighters who usually deal with these massive wildfires. And so the Biden administration saying they're immediately plussing up the salaries for those firefighters to $15 an hour, whereas a lot of them only made about $13 an hour just a few weeks ago. They're also trying to move a lot of those firefighters from temporary seasonal workers to year-round workers, which frankly, Joe, is an acknowledgement that wildfire season is all year long these days. And the Biden administration also working to offer grants to communities, states, localities to do resiliency for wildfires that are going to be coming with more and more frequency.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear that they're working on that. Josh, thank you so much. Breaking news out of Tokyo this morning. Gymnastics superstar Simone Biles is out of the team finals.
Out because of an injury. We want to go straight to Tokyo. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk is there. Steph, I know that's early. We're just learning. But what can you tell us about how this happened and anything we know about how she's doing?
Yeah, sure, Joe. You know, we just got a statement from USA Gymnastics. I'll read it to you right now. Simone has withdrawn from the team final competition due to a medical issue. She will be assessed daily to determine medical clearance for future competitions. In other words, they're not ruling out that she will compete in the competitions to come. Obviously, there's the all-around and the individual competitions. But, you know, we were watching her tonight, and we saw her do one of her vaults, and it's really one of her strengths. And she landed in a way that honestly made everyone in the newsroom here wince just looking at it with this kind of deep knee bend that we're not used to seeing from Simone. And, you know, we watched the qualifiers as well, and you guys saw it. She stumbled a couple of times in a really uncharacteristic kind of way. She stepped completely out of bounds on one of her vaults, and then she stepped completely off the floor during one of her tumbling passes on the floor. And I don't know whether any of those are linked, but we can say that she certainly has not looked herself in these competitions. And this is just a crushing blow for this team tonight. It's really difficult to overstate the impact that it's going to have and what it's going to do to their chances in the team competition.
Yeah, so let's talk through that, Steph. So this is the team final. Everyone's score counts. Every point counts. We know what happened in the qualifier with the Russians taking first place. So what does this mean now for the team? Does someone replace Simone in this? What happens to all those points that just are basically left on the floor because she's not participating in any more of these events?
Yeah, well, Jordan Childs is going to come in and replace her position, but no one replaces Simone Biles, right? I mean, she is the anchor of the team, and you have to imagine not only the pressure on Jordan, but also the team just emotionally dealing with Simone Biles walking out in the very, very beginning of this competition tonight, and your hearts go out to them as well as they try to manage this competition tonight. They're all pros, and they're obviously going to do their best, but there's an enormous amount of pressure, and it's a crushing blow, not just for them too. I mean, almost for this entire Team USA Olympic team. Simone Biles is the headliner. We've been talking about her really since last year, and the hopefulness that she would get more gold medals and we could see her continue to make history. And tonight, all of that seems in jeopardy, although USA Gymnastics very clearly saying she's going to be assessed in the days to come, and not saying that she's going to be pulling out of the Olympics altogether.
Yeah, and Stephanie, that's the big question that obviously we don't know the answer to right now. But she, besides the team final, still has 5 more competitions left. She's qualified for the overall individual title and, of course, in the 4 other events. And that's the big question. What's the timing for those as we move forward? They're really scattered across the entire Olympics, right? But I mean, I guess we could see how bad the injury is if it's possible. She competes in later ones or none of them or all of them. We just don't know, right?
Yeah, that's true, Joe. And there are only 10 more days left, right? I mean, it's not a lot of time to get over an injury. And, these gymnasts put an incredible amount of stress on their bodies. Simone in particular, with the kinds of things that she does. I mean, she does things that no other gymnast does. And that kind of pressure on your body day in and day out can have an impact. I mean, it clearly can. And it happening right now in this moment in the middle of these games is terrible. It's terrible for her, for sure, for her team, and for the entire Team USA. So, we'll see in the days coming up whether she can get back in for the all-around or whether she can start to get back in for the individuals. We just don't know at this point. Savannah and Joe?
It's just heartbreaking. I mean, we had just seen her post on Instagram. Sometimes she feels the weight of the world on her shoulders, the pressure on these athletes, too. And you just think about them as individuals and humans to go through something like this on this stage. Ugh. It's tough. All right, Steph Gosk, thank you for bringing us this breaking news.
If I have just a second to quickly add, just to add, the camera was very close on her face throughout these moments after the vault, and she just looked so crushed and emotional herself, I have to say. Back to you guys.
All right, I think everyone watching could feel that too. So, right. Thank you, Steph.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Steph.
it.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here. And click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.